Okay. Good morning. Uh, okay, you can now unmute yourself. Okay. Uh, so today is your first day in general surgery. So good morning to all. First you have to know that why are you coming to the surgical ward? Okay. So today's discussion will be, the contents will be first the aim of your clinical training. Okay. So why are you posted in for clinical training in surgery ward? Then how how you people will be taught from our side. Then the guidelines on the clinical postings and the objectives you will know, and I'll tell you the recommended textbook, what should you follow, what should you not follow, and those things. Okay, so let's start. Next. First, everyone knows you need these three things in medical profession, whether it is surgery, whether it is medicine, doesn't matter. You need these three things. One is knowledge, skill, and attitude. Everyone know this. And one important thing in the last line you can see, the diagnose, workup, and proper referral of common surgical condition. So the most important thing is you have to know when you as a medical officer, when you serve anywhere in periphery, then first the main important thing you have to know is that when to refer a patient. There's a very slight margin of error in this, and some people know when to refer, and some people do not know when to refer the patients. Okay, so you have to know what is the you will play cricket, right? In cricket, you have to know when to duck and leave the ball, and there's the same thing. You have to know when to refer the patient to your senior or a proper surgeon for the betterment of the patient. Now here comes, this is not in the slide, another thing I'm saying you, the main thing is about medical ethics. You have to know what is medical ethics, what are the features of medical ethics. These things are not in the slides, but I'm just telling you. Okay. So there are 4 principles of medical ethics. You have to remember these 4 things for the rest of your life. Okay. Whether it is medicine, whether it is surgery, doesn't matter, any subject. So the main 4 things of your medical ethics are, first is autonomy. Okay. So what is autonomy? You know what is autonomy? Autonomy is like you have to talk to the patient. You have to respect the decision of the patient. If the patient is saying no, you have to give him options. So whether he can be treated by any medical management, medical treatment, or he needs any surgery. So you have to respect the decision of the patient. This is called autonomy. Next thing, the next principle of medical ethics is beneficence. Beneficence means you have to know, you have to care for the benefit of the patient. Whatever you do, it should be for the benefit of the patient and nothing else. The third thing is non-malfeasance. You know malfeasance. Malfeasance means malpractice. So it should be non-malfeasance. There should not be any malpractice related to the patient or related to the disease. Then the fourth last thing is the justice. The justice is whatever you do, anything you do, it should be justified. It should bring justice to the patient. If you can't cure the condition, you can just say that your disease is not in a, not in that condition, so that I can treat you. So you have to be free. You have to be proper conversation with the patient, so that you can deliver justice to the patient. So these are the four basic principles of medical ethics: autonomy, beneficence, non-malfeasance, and your justice. This is not the size as I told you. So this thing again the same. The aim of any domain of medicine or surgery is knowledge, skill, and attitude. I'll explain. Okay. So this is again the strategies which are used in teaching and learning activities. Like lectures will be given to you in theory classes for basic principles and systems-based aspects of surgery. Then seminars will be organized then your clinical, you will have clinical posting in your ward. Then you will be taught the basic surgical skill training like normal surgical suturing, knotting, and all. Now, these are the guidelines of your clinical postings. Your clinical posting will be from 9 a.m. to like 12 p.m. every day, from Monday to Friday. Okay. Then your attendance should be minimum of 75%, and the attendance will be counted from 4th semester onward till your 9th semester. And based on that, you'll be allowed to sit in the final examination. Okay. And you have to maintain a case record book and the surgical skills you have learned throughout your clinical posting period. This is a proverb. You have to remember. You have to this is an interesting one, that he who studies medicine without books sails an uncharted sea, but he who studies medicine without patients does not go to the sea at all. So, what do you mean by this? What do you understand? The thing is that you can study medicine even without books. Your patient will serve as books for you, but you cannot learn medicine without seeing a patient, or without touching a patient, or without talking to a patient, or without going nearby a patient. So this is the thing of. Now your objectives of clinical training will be, you have to, in a bedside, you have to take a detailed and relevant history of the patient. Why the patient came, what is the chief complaint of the patient. So what do you mean by chief complaint? Chief complaint is the complaint that is for which the patient has come to the hospital. 1 or 2 problems the patient will describe to you, then for which he has come here to seek medical advice. This is chief complaint. Then after chief complaint, you have to take detailed history of his past, any similar past problem or like that. I'll go in detail about this in the following classes. Then you have to carry out a physical examination. Like physical examination means you have to see for the general things like pulse, blood pressure. Then I'll talk to you later on. Pulse, blood pressure, pallor, icterus, these things. And by saying these things, you have to identify the patient's problems and reach a differential diagnosis. Now, what is differential diagnosis? Differential diagnosis is clinically after examination, it is very difficult to reach a definite diagnosis. So you will work out the things. You will after taking history. In history, you have to take certain things, and you have to take certain negative history to rule out some diseases. By these things, you can get a differential diagnosis of 4 or 5 diagnoses maybe in a system. Okay, and after that, you have to do any investigation and all to rule out the other causes and reach a particular diagnosis. So this is the thing of differential diagnosis. You can reach differential diagnosis by clinical examination. So in your exam also, it will be like main thing will be differential diagnosis. There is no need to tell a definite diagnosis in your exam also. If you can say the differential diagnosis, 3 or 4 differential diagnoses after examining a patient, after taking proper history, that will suffice. Okay. These things I have already told you. Minimum 75% attendance is required for you to get to be able to sit in the exam, and your marks will be like calculated from this semester only, from 4th semester onwards to 9th semester, and like based on this, your allow list to you will be allowed or disallowed in exam. Okay. Now recommended is what to study. Okay. The main thing is there is a debate around the Indian writer and the foreign writer. Okay, so I'll tell you one thing, that for your for practical you can definitely go with S-class for textbooks surgery for practical, for your clinical for clinical orientation and all clinical practice. But for your theory part, you can go through these 2 books. One is your foreign writer Brilliant, which is the main main textbook of surgery, which is followed worldwide, and another SRB's method of surgery, that is we follow in India mainly. So these 2 books you can follow for your undergraduate classes and your undergraduate studies. Uh, so your exam will be like this: internal assessment for theory and practical. That will be dependent on your from performance from 4th semester to 9th semester, your internal assessment marks, and then there will be final examination. There will be 2 papers of 2 hours duration, 60 plus 60 marks. Total is 120, and your practical will be of 120, and 60 marks of internal assessment. Total is your 300 marks. Okay. Now, how to remember the things in surgery? You have to make your own mnemonics to remember the things. Okay. But what we will teach in your in class will be basic principles and what to study and like the concepts. But the main thing that the concepts you have to remember by making your own mnemonic or your own way. That is individually variable thing. Okay. And from next class, it should be a two-way communication. Means you have to unmute yourself and you have to discuss with me. Whatever you don't understand or whatever if there is any problem, you have to discuss with me live. Okay. So there should be a two-way communication, because if I keep on telling something, I don't know whether you are understanding or not. You have to give response. You can type in the chat box, or you can like unmute yourself and say something to me, whatever may be. So, like there are 3 S in surgery. One is symptom, one is sign, and one is surface anatomy. These 3 S are very important from surgery point of view. Now, what is symptom? The symptom is anything which is complained by the patient. The patient is complaining to you. He has come to your OPD or he has come to the hospital. He is in the bed. You have gone to take history. The patient will say that I have come here for these things. I have come here for pain in the abdomen, for fever, vomiting. These are symptoms. That is expressed by the patient or told by the patient. But what is a sign? Sign is something the patient cannot elicit or patient cannot say. The sign is something you have to find out by clinical examination, and then you have to correlate this sign with the existing symptoms of the patient. Okay. So the common symptoms in surgery are pain in the abdomen, then fever, then vomiting, then bleeding per rectum or bleeding per mouth. These are the common symptoms in surgery. What are common signs? Common signs in surgery. Like I will tell you in the later part. Okay, what are the common signs? And another thing is surface anatomy. So you must be knowing the surface anatomy, because you have in anatomy you have read the anatomy part. Okay, already. So surface anatomy is again very important, because based on surface anatomy only we have to we perform surgery. If you don't know the surface anatomy of an organ, then you cannot perform surgery. You cannot give incision accurately, and that will be cumbersome for you. Okay. Next. So I have already said these things. Symptoms of the body's mother tongue means complaints given by the patient. So signs are in a foreign language, means what we elicit, find out. It is not complained by the patient. The patient does not know that his pulse rate is more or less, his blood pressure is more or less, or he has a pallor or not. These things the patient does not know. You have to elicit these things. Surface anatomy and surface marking. These are the I will say you some points. Okay. So okay. So you know hyoid bone. This is the hyoid bone. Okay, the prominent part. This is the hyoid bone. Just below the hyoid bone is the thyroid cartilage. You can see the cartilaginous structure present just below the prominent hyoid bone. Okay. Then this is mastoid tip. Mastoid tip will be present just below and in front of your pinna. Okay. Then I will go to these things individually when I teach you your clinical examination part. Then I will go with these things. Okay. So you can see here, like this is known as your Ziffy sternum. Okay, where your clavicle to clavicles and your sternal head attached together. This is known as your Ziffy sternum. Then just below the Ziffy sternum there is manubrium sterni. Then where the manubrium ends, your sternal angle will begin. Sternal angle and then your manubrium sternal joint. Then your ribs. Ribs are there. There are 12 pairs of ribs in your body, and there are 11th and 12th ribs are known as floating ribs because they don't have any bony attachment to your sternum. Okay. So, and this point is known as the prominent point over the back of your head is known as your external occiput. Okay. Then your iliac crest is the most prominent point over the lumbar region, or over the, you can say over the loin area. So, let's start with history. Next slide. Start Korea and should I to okay. Now I'll be coming to the case history. I'll not like cover the whole thing today. Just the basic, the first few slides of your case history. How to take case history and all. Okay. Okay. So, what is a case history? A case history is defined as a planned professional conversation that enables the patient to communicate his or her symptoms, feelings, and fears to the clinician so as to obtain an insight into the nature of patient's illness and his or her attitude towards them. So, what do you understand by this? A history should be thorough. You can ask anything to the patient, but it should not be a leading question. What do you mean by leading question? Means yes or no. It should not be a yes or no question. You have to give the patient chance to explain his disease or explain his symptoms. This is called history taking. Okay, and after the patient explains to you about his symptoms and about his problems. Okay, after that you can ask leading question of yes or no type question to elicit something or to arrive at a particular diagnosis. So, but initially you should not ask a leading question to the patient. It should always be patient's talk or patient's conversation. Patient should tell you and you should listen. Till how much time he may continue to talk or he may continue to say you have to listen the whole thing about his problems, when it started, what is the when it started, what problem, how many days back it started, what is the present scenario, it has decreased or it has increased in intensity, these things. Okay. So your objectives on history objectives of your history are to establish a positive professional relationship with the patient. Means you have to be very polite with the patient. You have to be you have to build a relationship with the patient. For that, you have to you should not name a patient, or you should not call by his name. If you call by a brother or sister or like something like uncle or auntie, they will build a proper professional relationship with the patient. The patient will feel happy, and the patient will then respond to you more accurately and without any hesitation. So this is the main thing. Now, after that, the history will provide you the information concerning the patient's past or surgical and personal history. Because he has come to you for the first time with his symptoms, but he might have suffered from the same symptoms or some other symptoms in the past. So we have to take these things into account while taking the history. Then the steps involved in the history taking are you have to assemble all the facts. Already I have said you, assemble all the available facts rather from the statistics, whatever the patient has said to you, if everything you should keep in your mind. Okay, you should not interrupt the patient while he is speaking. You should not interrupt the patient and ask a leading question. First, you allow him to finish his whatever he wants to say. After that, you can ask him question. This is very important. If you interrupt him in the middle and start asking leading question, what will happen? He will not feel confident to speak anymore, or he may hide something from you. So better you should allow him to speak as much as he can, whatever he wants to say, and after he finishes saying everything, then if you feel like there is this question is important to ask to arrive at a diagnosis, then you can ask him any leading question. Okay. Then after that, you have to analyze and interpret all the examination details and your history points to reach the provisional diagnosis. And what I told you earlier, that make a differential diagnosis of all possible complications. You may not arrive at a provisional diagnosis by history and clinical examination. Even we can't. So it is not mandatory in your exam that you have to arrive at a particular diagnosis. If you have taken history and done the examination properly, and if you can say the differential diagnosis of these patients, that will be very much enough for you. Okay. Now, the components of a history are, you have to take the patient particulars. Patient particulars means you have to his name, his age, his address of the patient, then his marital status, then his date of admission when he came to the hospital, and when you were examining the patient. These things you have to take in patient particulars. So everything is important, because you might be like, what is the importance in name, or what is the importance in religion? These things. So these things are also important, because by a particular name you can know that this patient is a Hindu, this patient is a Muslim, and some diseases are related to these things. Some diseases are more common in Hindus, some diseases may be more common in Muslims. So these things are also important. So you cannot ignore any point in history taking. Each and every point of history taking, whatever is given in the book, you should take seriously, because every point is important. Age is very much important, because every disease is related to some particular age groups. So age is very much important. Then your history of present illness. History of present illness, if the patient will elaborate to you how his symptoms started, how his symptoms has regressed or progressed till now. If there is any associated symptom with his main symptom, these are the things in your history of present illness. You have to elaborate these things. Then in past history, you have to take like whether the patient has suffered from the same symptoms in the past, or he was hospitalized from some other disease in the past. These things you have to take into account. In personal history, the main things you have to ask is he an alcoholic? Because many diseases are related to alcohol consumption. Then if he is a known smoker, if he smokes, then for how many years he is smoking, how many cigarettes per day, everything you have to take. Then your tobacco chewing, related to tobacco chewing, because some diseases are related to etiology, tobacco chewing. These things you have to take. Then in your family history, patient's family history, there are some genetic diseases which are inherited from the family. So if you are suspecting some type of familial diseases, or some you are having a diagnosis, differential diagnosis of some family diseases, then you have to take family history of similar illness in the family. If any of his family member or her family member was diagnosed with the same disease and died of that disease, these things you have to take in family history. Then in treatment history, you have to take the main thing is we have to take the allergy history. If the patient is allergic to any known medication, because then you cannot use these medications when in this setting, because the patient will be allergic to the same medications. So these things are important in history. Then the self-introduction. First, when you go to the bedside and to take the history from some patient, first you greet the patient by his name and tell him good morning or good afternoon, something like that, so that he feels well. Then he will feel good, he will feel confident, he will feel motivated. everything. Then he will say you the things more politely, more